Welcome back to another episode of Empowered Intimacy, Getting Your Sexy Back After Breast Cancer. I'm Melissa Berry, and I'm here with my friend Deltra. I loved our last conversation about reconnecting with ourselves. In this episode, we're going to talk about the challenges we faced in our marriages after our breast cancer diagnosis. How did we navigate intimacy? What were our biggest struggles and breakthroughs? Join us as we share our own personal stories and offer advice for those seeking to rekindle intimacy with their partner after a breast cancer diagnosis. Deltra, here we are again.
We're back.
We're back. Episode 2. How you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic.
You look gorgeous.
So do you.
Your hair is rocking, but I digress. I gotta say, our first episode, I loved it so much. Love being the key word, because we talked about loving yourself again after a breast cancer diagnosis, because I'm sure you agree, before you could even think about being with anyone else, you gotta love yourself and feel good about yourself, don't you think?
Absolutely. It's not just a cliche.
It is not. It is not. And, we're going to take it a few steps further in this episode for sure. And we're going to talk about our sex lives when we were married, going through our divorce. This is kind of like the tough stuff. And I know from having little dinners and chats with you, we have similar stories and in some ways different also. How long were you married for?
I was married for 12 years.
Wow.
Yep.
And would you
10
say
at the time of diagnosis.
Mm-hmm. And so would you say, like, were you guys kind of having some issues when you were diagnosed? Were things already kind of like rough?
Yeah. When I was diagnosed, things were really feeling like a marriage on life support.
Oh my gosh. Oh, I never heard that term before. So it was just, what made you hang on to it?
As stereotypical as it sounds, just being in the position I was in, being a stay-at-home mom, and I had been for the entirety of my marriage, and I had 5 children. So, leaving just felt very unrealistic.
Of course. And that's not what we signed up for, right? When we got married.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, my marriage was definitely in a very tough spot when I was diagnosed. So I think, like I always tell people, when they ask me for advice, when they're diagnosed and they're married or they have significant others, that I think it either makes you much stronger or it could be the thing that kind of really cracks the foundation even further. And I think in my case, it definitely didn't help. And I think in some ways it definitely made things harder for sure on many, many levels. So sexually speaking, how were things with your ex-husband like when you were let's take it back a little bit before the diagnosis and after the diagnosis. What did that look like for you?
I'm not gonna lie, the only good thing at that point in our marriage was our sex lives, which sounds kind of weird because usually you would think once other things go downhill or you don't have like a emotional connection or we were had became 2 totally different people that did not mesh. Okay. But we still had a really good, some people just have physical chemistry and we did have that, but that is definitely not enough to maintain a marriage.
Sure.
That's like the stuff of, just hookups, not a marriage. So things were good, but it was definitely taking kind of a hit. It was getting a little harder because especially for women, everything, the foreplay starts long before you're in the bedroom, like it's mental, it's emotional.
Sure.
And all of that was not really there anymore. I was feeling like I live with a stranger. I don't really feel attached to this person anymore. But I will say when I got my diagnosis, as I mentioned, in our previous episode, I really felt like I tried to cling, to what I knew. And I wanted to feel like a safe space. And, so I think I kind of really leaned into, our intimacy or sexual intimacy
because
to
that's
feel
the one thing
close.
That works.
Yeah.
Right.
To feel close. And so it's tough when, all of that started to kind of go away also and leave like nothing.
So you did feel like after the diagnosis, it was harder and harder to feel sexual.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's normal. I know in my case, I'll be honest, I always suffered with depression and anxiety. So I think for me, being a busy working mom and raising a family, I struggled with like, feeling sexy. And so I feel like in that department, I was compromised anyway, just from like the anxiety side of things. And then I think when I was diagnosed with breast cancer, I feel like it just shot me to the moon. Like I just physically and emotionally did not feel sexy anymore. So I feel like I was already knocked down, and it just took me like next level. Like I hate to say the words, but I'm going to be honest. I almost didn't even feel like a woman anymore because preventatively, because I had the BRCA gene when I was 39, I had my ovaries removed. So I was swung into like surgical menopause, and I thought, oh great, I'm going to wake up one day and have like gray hair and like, I'm going to have vaginal dryness and like all those things that you hear about. And my sex life is going to be over. And it scared me. And I think it scared my now ex-husband because, look, even though it was hard, like you want to have that connection with your partner. You want to have that intimacy. It's important, for so many reasons.
And those are things that I think like when you get married, especially if you're younger, like that just feels like way far into the future. Like nobody thinks you're going to experience like your wife going into, menopause and everything in her 30s or such.
Of course, especially when you
because
first
of
meet.
cancer.
Like for a lot of us, sex is like that's that's like
like
the
we were talking
most
about. It's
important
very
part.
spicy in the beginning, in the beginning. But yeah, it's a big shift.
So were you guys able to pick up and resume like the intimacy that you had, or would you say that was sort of like the beginning of like towards the end of the marriage, and then you ended it?
Yeah, like I said, it kind of felt like that was the last thing that was left, and it just got tougher and tougher because at some point I started to feel like it wasn't as much of a safety net as I originally felt it was. Like I started to feel like I'm sure there's people out there that I could feel more of a connection with. And, for me and for a lot of people, I know that feeling like a connection, even just basic human like level of respect and safety, it doesn't have to be like a full blown emotional connection or I'm in love and so I can enjoy like, sexual intimacy.
Right.
But for me in my marriage, it was just at such a place of not feeling safe, not feeling respected. And so everything was out the window,
And that's a really scary point to be at.
Yeah.
And then you layer on not just a breast cancer diagnosis, but now metastatic breast cancer and navigating through all of that. I know. So I know with me, like, sex was honestly the last thing I was thinking about when I was going through treatment. But at the same time, I knew that for my partner, it was still important, and I wanted to still have that closeness with him. And I feel like, God, I just want to say for someone that's tuning in, like, that maybe you were just diagnosed this morning and your relationship or your marriage is struggling and you're thinking, all right, like how is this going to, and obviously, sexuality and intimacy may not be the first thing you think about, but it's one of them. And especially if you're talking about having to, have your ovaries removed, have your breasts removed. And I think it's really scary. And I think for me, I just wanted to still maintain as much normalcy in my life and in my marriage as I possibly could. And I remember there were times that he had to do things that were so far from being sexy. And an example, like I had drains. He helped me like with my drains. And like for anyone that's listening that doesn't know what that's like you basically have, looks like long straws hanging out on the side of your, torso with these bags filling with fluid, and you have to empty them every so often. And I remember half of me was like, oh my God, this man is like incredible for doing this, that you're almost like a nurse right at that point. And then the other half of me is like almost felt shame because how is he ever going to look at me the same way again? I
hate for people to feel that way. But, it's kind of like when someone watches you give birth.
Yes.
You know,
Oh my
except
God,
to,
that's a
like,
great
the 10th
analogy.
degree, you know?
Because there's not really anything sexy about that. Did you have vaginal?
No, amazing.
Did you have
yeah,
natural?
I did.
I never did
with
natural.
all
Okay.
of mine.
Wow.
But yeah, it changes something, I think, you know. But this is, I always tell people when they say, you know, I've heard so many stories of people who are like, you know, when I got my diagnosis, I gave my spouse the option to like walk because it was going to be hard. But this is, I always say, this is what they signed up for. Like,
It's true,
especially in
sickness
a
and in
marriage,
health.
and we're
Yeah.
human, and things don't always go as planned. You know, we don't know what's ahead when we say I do. We don't know, you know, who's going to get what kind of diagnosis might come into the picture. And so something like your husband helping with your drains, I mean, we could really look at it as like a form of intimacy. It is someone seeing you really vulnerable.
Oh my God. Like, Deltra, seriously, like I wish I had this, I wish I could have had this conversation with you when this was all going on.
Yeah.
Because I felt so ugly. And that's why I do what I do, because I don't want I don't want anyone to feel like that. You know, like, cancer is hard enough. Like, you should never feel like, I always say, like, I felt like almost like a shell of myself.
Yeah.
And as hard as it was for my marriage to end and all of that, like, he did a great flipping job of, you know, helping with that part of it. And it must have been really hard for him. And that's, like, I think the thing we forget about too, like, which could be another episode I'll have to add at some point, is like, you know, the caregivers, the partners, and the way that they have to step up and show up. And it's not the holding hands in the park and having picnics that we dream about. It's the other stuff that we sign up for, and we don't realize that it really could happen in that way. And, you know, I remember, like, you know, obviously he saw me through so many different stages. Like, I had the bilateral mastectomy, and then the expanders were put in, and I remember like being so afraid for him to really see it, because what if he didn't like it? What if it turned him off? And that scared the crap out of me. It's your marriage, it's your partner. It's like your ride or die.
Yeah.
And, you know, I have to say, as hard as it was to get divorced and all that, like, my divorce had nothing to do with my breast cancer. And I share these memories with so much love and respect for how it was handled by my partner and the father of my children. And I'm really grateful for it, because if anything, I was the one that had the problem with the way that I looked and felt. He didn't. He really didn't. And not everyone is going to be that lucky.
Yeah. That's
Like, I'm sure
a
you've spoken to
blessing.
women that, like, you know, were really worried about their significant others being afraid to touch them, or not wanting, or being disappointed, you know, especially for our amazing flatty community, you know, for their partners to maybe not be on board with that. There's so many layers to this.
Yeah, absolutely. At the end of the day, though, I think that having a really supportive spouse that understands, like, this is your life. So you have to, you know, and like you've mentioned, everything happens so fast when you get a diagnosis, and then it's like, boom, 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 you know, like, here's the treatment plan. Here's what you have to do. And you hardly have time to, like, wrap your head around what just happened.
Exactly. And, like, the whole, like, intimacy, one thing I've learned actually by doing the work that I do and speaking to other experts, and that's, like, one of the reasons that we're sharing our stories, but we also want to share some really great practical tips and advice. And, like, lesson number one is, like, sex, or, you know, intimacy doesn't have to mean penetrative sex.
Yes.
It could be holding hands, it could be cuddling, it could be kissing, it could be, you know, just like cuddling on the couch and watching a movie. Don't you agree? Like,
Yeah, reading books together, or in my case, I like being read aloud, like someone to
you
read things aloud
go.
to me. But yeah, there's a lot of different ways to be intimate.
definitely. And it doesn't have to be, and especially, I mean, I think especially right after, you know, certain surgeries, you're not even supposed to. You know, there's a time that you have
Yes.
to refrain anyway. But for those of us that are tuning in, they're like, how am I going to get through that? Like there are other ways to be intimate with your partner. And in some ways, it's really sweet, right? In finding those other ways, you know, like reading books together, like, or maybe finding other, activities to do together. But I think, and we don't have to mention names, but you even know of someone amazing in the community that is very open about not having penetrative sex at all ever again, and they're a happy couple.
Yeah. And I think it is very valid to say there are different forms of intimacy, but I also don't want to just, dismiss when people actually do enjoy and want to be able to have penetrative sex,
Exactly.
and they should be able to speak to their, because friends don't know what advice to give, and should be able to ask, our doctors and get, some sort of recommendations or referrals. I understand they're usually just, we all know they're trying to focus on our physical,
On saving our
keeping
lives.
us alive.
Right.
Yes. But there's more to just like keeping our physical body alive. Like we have a life to live,
Absolutely.
and deserve to get to enjoy it and experience pleasure and everything else.
Absolutely.
So.
I've spoken to women that are like, God damn it. Like, I had breast cancer. I lost my breast. I lost my hair. I want to have sex.
Yeah.
And the good news is that there are so many great products out there, whether it's lubricant, and like, don't give up. There's also, you can talk to your OBGYN. They have dilators and all kinds of things.
Yes.
I just would get sometimes put off, and like, how would your friends who don't have cancer know? Like, hun, like, try coconut oil. I'm like, girl, that is like having a migraine and taking baby aspirin, okay? Like, that's not going to work, And so it's definitely not a one-size-fits-all conversation, but I just want anyone that's listening to, like, not feel discouraged. And you don't have to go from, like, the OR to, like, full-on sex. Like, there's all kinds of stuff in between. But you raise a good point that a lot of us are like, no, sex is important to me. I want to get there as soon as I can. I'd like to give a very special thanks to my sponsors, Daiichi Sankyo, AstraZeneca, and Lilly, for supporting the Cancer Fashionista Foundation and making the Empowered Intimacy, Getting Your Sexy Back After Breast Cancer series possible. By listening to this podcast, you agree not to use the content for medical advice to treat any medical condition in either yourself or others. Please consult your own physician for any medical issues that you may be having. This disclaimer also applies to all of my guests. What advice would you give to someone that's really scared about losing that part of their relationship with their partner?
Well, I would definitely say that they would need to advocate for themselves, and look for the professionals that can really help. Because like you said, I think you mentioned dilators.
Yep.
I know they're like rejuvenating like surgeries.
Bring it. Share what
there
you know.
Are some very, there are options out there to try and help you to be able to get back to enjoying, because you never want to push yourself for like a partner's sake to do something that is literally painful to your body,
Absolutely. And you want it, and you don't want to like sacrifice your own comfort for someone else. And like your partner's going to want you to feel good and safe and not in pain.
Yeah, a good partner.
Yeah,
definitely
a good partner
will care.
Exactly. It's definitely a really tricky topic, and I think we were like having dinner last night. I mentioned too, it was years ago. I was and watching a panel about sexual dysfunction and breast cancer and the impact that it has on your sex life. And there was this woman next to me, like I saw she had tears coming down her eyes. I'm like, "Are you okay?" And she was like, "I don't think I'll ever be able to have sex with my husband again." But she was so happy to be in that space of learning and getting these tips, because there are other things to do beyond going to CVS and getting, KY jelly or the coconut oil, or or even like, don't be discouraged if your doctor tries something and it doesn't work. There's so many modalities, and there's so many things that we can do in that regard. And yes, in some cases it's just not physically possible, or maybe for some of us, it's for both partners, hey, we're happy where we are with all kinds of other activities, if you will.
Absolutely. And that's why it's important. I mean, I do think that a diagnosis like cancer brings out whatever is under the surface in a relationship. But that's why I liken it to when people talk about becoming empty nesters, and they say like, you need to be each other's best friend, because you can't just focus on kids. Like, one day they're going to be gone,
Exactly.
And I feel like it can be the same with sex. like in the case of my marriage, like discovering like, oh, that's like the only thing we really have chemistry.
Isn't
like
that interesting? Because some marriages, like it just, but for you guys, that was the one thing that kind of was the glue that was keeping you together.
Yeah. And so I think that when you take that away, you know, a cancer diagnosis or whatever, and it's like, oh, we can't do that, and you realize you don't have other forms of intimacy that really work and make you feel connected, you know, that's a really big deal.
Definitely. And I would say like if I had to give another tip to someone, maybe give a little hint to your partner, or for any caregivers or partners that are listening, like go to Victoria's Secret, get something cute that like maybe doesn't have emphasis or focus, or something from Anna Ono, you know, that doesn't focus necessarily on your breasts or your nipples, but just something that makes you feel really beautiful. You know what? I fell in love with nightgowns again.
Did you?
Yes.
All right. So I'm guessing not the moo-moos, not the only.
Spaghetti straps, some lace. Like, it's nice to feel, you know,
Yes.
you just have to almost kind of experiment and see what feels good and like what makes you feel pretty, you know?
Yes. Yeah, I mentioned that. That helped me significantly after my lumpectomy, especially.
Yeah, because I'm not going to minimize how a lumpectomy can make you feel. Like, did your ex-husband have issues? Like, how did he feel like when he saw the scar? Did that have any impact on how he saw you, do you think?
I don't think it really did. I think that I was nervous because this felt like a significant change. And throughout my marriage, I had small changes that I didn't feel very supported in. And so it was really difficult to like share something as scary as like a body change caused by cancer with him, when things like, you know, birthing babies or just regular, like, you know, I have a human body. So things change, like my weight fluctuates and everything. And I always felt, you know, like, he didn't validate me a lot. And so I didn't want to share, you know, much of my cancer body with him. I mean, at some point, like I said, the safety felt really gone, to the point where I felt like almost safer with the idea of like sharing it with new people, with strangers.
Interesting. And that's like such an interesting segue, I think, for like the next episode. Yeah, I mean, you know, I think another important tip to offer is like, if we're not feeling sexy, and that could mean just not, our head is just not in that moment, or we are experiencing vaginal dryness, or like we're just not, you know, feeling sexual. Like, how do we communicate that to our partner without making them feel like they're never going to have sex with us again or never be intimate with us again? Like, what would be some words of advice? Like, how did you bring it up with him about being close like that when you didn't maybe feel like it?
Yeah, I think it can look different. I think it can look different between early stagers and those of us with metastatic, you know, because I do think it's fair, you know, when I hear people who are early stage say like they were just focused on getting through treatment. That makes sense. It's just a season. And so I think any worthwhile partner would be understanding of that and supportive about it. You know, like, this is for a season. Not to say that there are not some changes, obviously, that last forever.
Absolutely.
And I've certainly learned that, you know, the more that I have friendships and such and hear from my early stage sisters, like, they have things that affect them long term, you know. But for me, you know, being metastatic, I really quickly, like, my mind shifted because I knew it wasn't going to be for a season. I knew it was going to be something I'd have to like learn to navigate constantly. And so that was always in my mind. And I was really open, you know, and vulnerable about like my own limits.
So
even
you raised
if it
a
was
great point.
energy.
Like, you had to not just embrace it, you had to like completely accept it. Like, this is how it's going to be, which means your partner completely accepting that this is how it's going to be.
Yeah, it's like they have to, or you have other deeper things to look at.
Exactly. I mean, for me, if we're going to talk about like also intimacy during my marriage, and then we could talk later in another episode, keep teasing the other episodes. Yes. But like, I lost feeling in my breasts, and I have some feeling, but I had my nipples removed also because my doctor felt like the lump was just a little too close and didn't want to take any chances. So I had nipple reconstruction. So I'll be honest, like, in my first life, I really enjoyed having my nipples touched. Like, to me, that was like, we used to call it second base. And like, to me, that was like, that turned the lights on. And that was really, really hard for me to let go of that, because I missed that feeling.
Yeah.
Like that like it's almost like explosive. It's like, to me, that's like, that was foreplay.
Yeah,
Like, and so I had to kind of relearn how to warm it up, if you will, to even get to the place where I wanted to have sex, because I felt like I lost a part of my body that didn't work anymore.
Yeah.
And it still frustrates me. And I'll be really candid in saying that I was with someone that I actually cried because we were in the middle of things, and he actually asked me, "Can you feel that?" And like my head exploded, because I'm like, wow,
Yeah.
like that's so amazing for someone to be able to be in that moment and in that level, want to make sure that you feel really good too. And that is so important, right? It's got to be with the right person.
There's that safety. Yeah.
That safety.
Yeah.
But I was like, oh my God, he's actually asking, like, if I can feel that. And and I remember it shook me. I had like tears, because it just meant so much to me that he was considering that and what he was doing. And I'm not going to lie, it took me a long time to accept that. And like I said, I have some feeling, but it's not the same amount of sensitivity that I had. And I do miss it. I do.
I hear that from a lot of people. And I mean, honestly, thoughts and prayers, because I get it. I'm always like, that would be really hard for me, because I'm a big like nipple play person too. And that's a tough one. I mean, even as like, vein isn't the right word I'm looking for. My chemo brain won't let me think the word I'm looking for right now. But it's like a weird thought in my head that like, well, I'm glad I've only had lumpectomy, because I would hate to like have to lose nipple sensation. Like the thought of it like just bothers me so much.
Yeah.
But it's like, no one is really, that's not at the top of your mind when you're just thinking about, I just need to do what I need to like extend my life.
To live, absolutely. And these are the sacrifices and the choices that we make along with our doctors. And it, like I said, it took a long time. And now, like, I enjoy kissing so much. And honestly, when someone holds my hand, like, and then this is I'm going to tell you the forehead kisses. Oh, MG. And I just recently discovered I didn't realize how much I loved a forehead kiss. It's like the sweetest thing ever.
Have you ever seen that meme though that is like, don't let them give you forehead kisses? It's how they like suck the the like logical thinking.
Oh my God. You
Honestly,
oh my God.
I'm like, don't forehead kiss me unless it's love, okay?
Oh my God, that's so funny. It's just like things like that are so endearing and could be intimate on like a totally different level.
Yeah,
and I'm gonna be 53, and I'm like, oh, that's something new that like that kind of. I love it. It's endearing, but it also kind of turns me on too, because it's sweet.
Yeah,
it's super sweet. So I guess even breast cancer off the table, right? If you just take women and sex and age and menopause and different partners, things are going to change anyway. Just breast cancer throws a whole other wild level into it.
It truly does. It really does. And I know we mentioned, I feel like we just shout out Anna Ono all the time.
I know, it's hard not to.
And I mentioned them last episode and how like it, their clothing, their wardrobe was among, what helped make me feel really comfortable in the body that I was dealing with. That was new to me. But for you, what was it like undressing for the first time around your husband?
It's like, it was hard for me because, like I said, he saw me in the most vulnerable moments, like right out of surgery with, drains and blood and fluids and I was scared. I was really scared that he wasn't going to see me the same way. And I have to say I was very pleasantly surprised and so relieved that it was kind of like an unspoken word, but it was sort of like, babe, if you feel good about yourself, I feel good about you. And if you don't feel good about yourself, you're crazy, because you're beautiful no matter what. Like, he was so amazing and kind in that regard. And again, I'll say it over and over again. I was really lucky in that way. Mm-hmm. And, but for me, I think I was always, and still continue to be, my toughest critic. Because
of course.
I remember when I first would look in the mirror before heading into the bedroom, and I didn't see my own natural breasts, and it depended what stage we're talking about, but like right out of surgery, it's like you're black and blue, you have stitches, like you don't with no nipples. And I didn't recognize myself. And it was so hard to be open enough to want to give yourself in that way to someone that you always did, because it's an amputation. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. And it was really scary. And look, reconstruction isn't right for everyone. And certainly now, I mean, I was diagnosed and treated 11 years ago. There are so many more choices now.
Yeah.
And for me, I just wanted to like get as close to my natural breasts as I could. And I did. And I eventually, and now like I sometimes even forget that I have implants. But I think it's all the phases going through it and the evolution of, like, in my particular case, having, the initial surgery, then having the implants and the expanders and the multiple surgeries, and getting to the point where you feel like you're done, at least the surgery part. It's a long haul. And that's why I wanted to have this conversation, because I'm telling you guys that are listening, like, those chapters are important too. I don't want you to always think about, and I'm sure you agree, like, you'll just wait until, after the reconstruction is done. Because what about, it's, Tuesday at 4:00 and you're, and you're getting the wink that, like, why don't we do this? And you're thinking, I'm not ready. Like you want to kind of work with what you have in that moment, and it's so hard. And there are going to be times that you don't want to have sex, you don't want to be touched, and that's okay. And there are going to be times that you're like, I feel like just cuddling. So wouldn't you agree that it's just like kind of figuring out with your significant other, like, where is that place like tonight, what's going to work for us tonight?
Yep.
And just being open.
It's a respect thing and a safety thing that you should be able to say no. And I also think what you said before was really important about, what was it? Oh, that when, if you are feeling good about yourself, that's really important. That really came into play especially when I was meeting new people. I was like, if I'm comfortable in my skin, then they don't really have a choice but to be
exactly, and you nailed
or it doesn't matter how they feel about my body.
And and that's like the magic ingredient. And like, this is the best way to put the little bow on this episode is if you feel good about yourself, and you can then communicate to your partner what feels good, what doesn't, and you guys just kind of work with what you got. That's like the best way to deal with this. It's certainly, there's no one answer for everyone. I wish there was, but we shared so much great advice, and now I'm really just excited to talk about our next episode, which is dating.
I've been ready.
Well, thank you. You're amazing, and I'm just so glad to be on the couch with you talking about these important topics, which I wish I had heard 11 years ago. So thank you, Deltra.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Empowered Intimacy, Getting Your Sexy Back After Breast Cancer. If you enjoyed it, be sure to check out the rest of our episode in this series. In the meantime, let's stay in touch. Be sure to follow me on Facebook and Instagram at Cancer Fashionista. And remember, cancer can take many things away from you, but it can't take away the essence that makes you the beautiful woman that you are.